All right, let's go live. How's it going, everybody? Chuck Holton here, coming to you from Panama, my studio in the mountains, and glad to see you. It looks like we got a bunch of people online already, so do me a favor and post in the chat where you're watching from, where are you coming in from. We got people from all over the world, and we've got Western Pennsylvania. That's a beautiful country, and lots of other places. Maryland, South Africa. I saw people from all over the place. Listen, if you would like to meet me face to face and indeed travel with me on a trip, we've got a couple of trips set up for next April to here in Panama. We're going to do a retreat, and then we've got a trip going to Armenia in June next year. Now, you might say, why in the world would I want to go to Armenia? Well, that just means you haven't done any, you haven't read much about Armenia, or, I mean, it is, I've been to 108 countries according to that map back there. And Armenia is the coolest place that I would recommend you go out of all the places I've ever been. It is really awesome. We love taking a tour there every year. And I know that it'll be a once-in-a-lifetime trip for you. We've got a few slots left open. So get signed up. You can send a email to info@holtonnews.com, or you can click the link that Connie just put up in the chat there, and that'll take you to the Panama tour. And then the Armenia tour looks like Mama Rissa just put up in the chat as well. So get signed up. We got a few slots left for each of those, and we'd love to meet you face to face, get to know you, and show you some of the places that we love the most. All right, so there are now 157 UN member states that recognize the country, the fictional nation of Narnia. I'm sorry, I said Narnia. I meant Palestine. Sorry. The fictional country of Palestine. As a matter of fact, I even made a little PowerPoint graphic presentation for you where we can look at this. That represents about 81% of the United Nations. The latest additions that are getting all the press today are the UK, France, Portugal, Canada, Australia, Belgium, Luxembourg, Malta, Monaco, and Andorra. Now, we're going to talk in a little bit about why this is spectacularly hypocritical for some of these countries. And we're going to talk about what it means in the world, what it means for Palestinians, and what it means for Israel. So recognition is framed around the 1967 borders, which is what they consider to be the West Bank, or Judea and Samaria for those of us who are Zionists, Gaza, East Jerusalem, and land swaps as may be required. That's what they say, and that gets very complicated, very complex, and kind of ridiculous over time. Now, the UN General Assembly voted last year to enhance Palestinian rights as a non-member observer state for the UN. What does that mean? It means they can't vote on things, and they're not a full member of the UN, which makes sense because they don't have an actual state, they don't have borders, they don't make their own passports, they don't have a recognized leader. Even the Palestinians themselves don't all recognize one leader. And so it's kind of ridiculous and it's really just virtue signaling on the part of these countries. But 157 countries out of 188 that are in the United Nations, 193, something like that, that are UN states. That's, again, more than 80% of all UN nations have recognized Palestine as a state, and it doesn't exist. And this is kind of similar to the idea of recognizing that men can get pregnant, things like that. It's like we don't like reality. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to declare that reality doesn't exist. And we're going to declare our own reality. We're going to live our truth. Well, as I've talked about before, truth is not subjective. It's not subject to what you think about it. It has nothing to do with your opinion about it. And so what we saw was Emmanuel Macron. I'm going to turn that audio down a little bit. I'm a little hot on the audio. Emmanuel Macron doing this yesterday in the UN General Assembly. Take a look.
We have been saying it since the first day of the war in Gaza. A life is worth a life. I know it. For having embraced the families of the hostages I met in Tel Aviv, then in Paris. And I think at this moment of the mother of a Tatar David, a starving hostage shown to the crowd by her captors. I think of Nimrod Cohen. She, a 19-year-old hostage whose father I just greeted. I know it. For having also visited the Palestinian victims of Israeli military operations, refugees in Al-Arish, women, children whose gaze I will not forget. I know it from having met young people from Gaza welcomed in France. And I think of Rita Barud, who should have been with us today, and who continues to testify to the distress of her relatives in Gaza. A life is worth a life. And our duty to all is to protect one another, an indivisible duty, as is our common humanity. A solution exists to break the cycle of war and destruction. It is the recognition of the other, of their legitimacy, their humanity, their dignity, that everyone opens their eyes again and sees human faces where war has placed the mask of the enemy or the features of a target. It is the recognition that Israelis and Palestinians live in twin solitude. Solitude of the Israelis after the historical nightmare of October 7th, 2023. Solitude of the Palestinians exhausted in this endless war.
Now, what a clown. What a maroon, as some people would say. Macron is standing up there and, holding forth, and he's talking, trying to somehow make the case that declaring a Palestinian state, so thereby rewarding Hamas for October 7th, somehow is in honor, is a way to honor the hostages that were taken by Hamas that are still being held in Gaza and those who have been released. He's trying very hard to justify this. And what's funny is Macron's government in France is literally hanging by a thread. The president of France resigned, no confidence vote. His coalition, Macron's coalition, is dangling by a thread, and it could very well be overthrown in the short term. Now, the opposition leader was a woman named Marine Le Pen. Marine Le Pen has been around for a while. She's a kind of a Trump-like figure for France, and she's gotten more and more popular. As she's gotten popular, of course, she's been attacked by the left. They've done the same thing in France that they do in the United States, and that is engage in lawfare against her, so that they can try to keep her from being able to win any elections. They've managed to convict her on some sort of trumped up charge of election fraud and make it so that she's disqualified from running for prime minister and taking over the government in the next election, 2027. She is trying to get that reversed, going to the Supreme Court in France, and that may indeed get reversed. But even if it doesn't, her coalition continues to grow and get more powerful, and they may very well take over France in the near term, in the next couple of years. If that happens, then this declaration recognizing Palestine as a state could very well be reversed. We saw the same thing happen in Argentina. Argentina, several years ago, recognized Palestinian autonomy as a state. And when Javier Milei became the president of Argentina, he reversed that decision, took it away, and is now moving the Argentinian embassy to Jerusalem. So again, a lot of this is just performative. It's just virtue signaling, trying to get into the cool kids club in the United Nations. All these leftists kind of run together in packs. And so now Italy apparently did not join in on this decision to recognize full UN, or I'm sorry, full autonomy or full statehood for the state of Palestine, which again has no borders, doesn't exist. So because Italy did not choose to join Canada and Australia and France and the UK and others this time at the UN General Assembly in recognizing Palestine, pro-Palestinian activists, pro-Palestinian rioters in Italy have been going crazy. In Milan yesterday, it looked pretty crazy. Let's see if we've got, I thought I had a video of that. Yeah, this is a big protest riot thing that they had in Milan. You see those cops there in the foreground backing up as they're being sort of pushed by all of these rioters who looks like somebody got hurt over there. You see a bunch of tear gas get thrown and this is near the central train station in Milan. So you see there, I mean, these people, it just cracks me up because it's like, we feel so strongly that Palestinians deserve to have their own state that we're going to act in ways that we see the Palestinians acting. We're going to try to, recreate October 7th in some sense in our own country here and destroy our own neighborhoods. They broke windows, smashed businesses, set things on fire, and attacked police all across in about 70 different cities across Italy. And what that tells you is that there aren't a lot of Italians left in Italy. And that's really unfortunate. But Italy has been just absolutely overrun by North African and Middle Eastern migrants. And over the last, 10 years. And that has caused a lot of chaos in Italy. There's a lot of what you see there. A lot of strikes nationwide, people standing in the middle of the street, shutting down commerce, and things like that. Italy is one of my favorite countries on planet Earth. It's one of the most romantic places you could take your spouse on a vacation, but you have to go to places where there are few of these migrants, and you have to be careful because even in like the far north of Italy, where we were this last June on Lake Como, near the border with Switzerland, there were a ton of migrants, and those migrants were running amok, threatening people, attacking people in the street, and things like that. So it's just unfortunate for all of Europe, but specifically for Italy. Now, the Security Council in the United Nations made a bid for full UN membership for Palestine back in April of 2024. That was vetoed by the United States. So what does this mean that 157 countries are now recognizing Palestine as a state? Nothing. Doesn't change anything on the ground. Israel still controls the borders. The Palestinian Authority controls pockets of West Bank or Judea and Samaria, the A zones. Hamas still is ruling Gaza by force. As a matter of fact, there was a video that came out this morning, this horrific video of Hamas executing Palestinians in Gaza. I didn't see exactly why, what was their rationale for doing that, but they had these guys lined up on their knees and they were just capping them in the back of the head and executing them. So Hamas still exercises some modicum of control inside Gaza, although that control is being whittled away day by day as the Israeli Defense Force moves into Gaza and into the last strongholds. Also, the Hamas terrorists released another video that shows proof of life of one of the remaining hostages in there. Again, what they're trying to do is use psychological torture on the Israelis to get more Israelis angry at the Israeli government and try to push them to make concessions. Israel is beyond making concessions at this point, and they keep saying that. They keep making that very clear. And so Hamas came to Donald Trump and sent Donald Trump a letter, reportedly, that asked Donald Trump to negotiate a 60-day ceasefire in exchange for a release of half of the remaining living hostages. That would be about 10 living hostages. Now, we haven't heard from the Trump administration whether or not they're going to push for that. I think the Israelis would actually be down for that. I think if they could get any of their remaining living hostages out, they would be willing to do a ceasefire or something like that. That's a far cry from the typical conditions that Hamas has been putting on any ceasefire, which is Israel has to leave Gaza entirely and stop fighting. They have to open up all of the crossings and allow as much aid in as possible. And they have to pay to redevelop Gaza, to rebuild Gaza. That's been their song all along here. But now it sounds like they're getting desperate because the pressure on Hamas continues to ramp up in Gaza City. The Israelis continue to wipe out several dozen Hamas fighters a day and wipe out several dozen buildings a day in central Gaza. So they apparently have come to President Trump. Let's see. I've got, I think, a video here from the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, talking about this, where he went on Fox. Take a listen.
When it comes to actually getting peace done, when it comes to actually stopping this, they're not going to any of these other countries.
Of course.
They're coming to us. They're going to President Trump, and they're asking him to get involved and bring it to an end. You just asked me about a letter to from Hamas. Hamas didn't send a letter to France. Hamas didn't send a letter to any of these countries on your list. Hamas apparently, supposedly, sent a letter to President Trump because everyone knows, even an evil group like Hamas, that he's the only one with the power and the influence to make something happen.
So Marco Rubio is there talking about, it's ironic that the United States is one of the countries that is not recognizing a Palestinian state, and yet the Palestinians are coming to President Trump because they know he has the power to actually get something done. They realize that this recognition of a Palestinian state doesn't help them in the short term. It's not going to help keep Hamas in power. And so Hamas is trying to delay the inevitable, really, is what they're trying to do by appealing to President Trump. And so we're going to have to keep our eye on that and see whether or not more of that, whether or not the Trump administration actually starts pushing for that and we get a ceasefire out of it. But I want to talk a little bit about who has not recognized a Palestinian state and why. So there are about 37 countries that still refuse to recognize a Palestinian state. Foremost among those, the United States, of course, but also Israel's Abraham Accord partners, the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, Japan, South Korea, some holdouts from the European Union, although quite a bit fewer after the UK and France jumped in. And the reason that these countries, some of them are tiny, tiny microstates like Tuvalu and Vanuatu and Eswatini and places like that. And the reasoning behind why they won't do this is because they're not stupid, for one. Many of the countries that have not recognized a Palestinian state get plenty of money or other economic benefit from the United States, and they don't want to jeopardize that. They realize that recognition is not going to solve terrorism, so it's kind of useless in that. Hamas's 1988 charter still calls for Israel's destruction. The Palestinian Authority doesn't have a charter because they exist under the PLO. Remember Yasser Arafat, PLO. And the PLO's charter also called for Israel's destruction, said that the Palestinian state was from the river to the sea. And they've never actually changed that. Yasser Arafat, or maybe Mahmoud Abbas, one of their leaders, said at one point, we recognize Israel's right to exist. And Israel said, okay, how about you change your charter to say that? And they said, yeah, we're going to get right to that. And they never did. So the official 1968 charter or whatever for the PLO still does not recognize Israel's right to exist. And even though in diplomatic forums, they will still say, oh yeah, we recognize Israel's right to exist. Really? We'll put that in writing. And they won't do it. They won't do it. So the United States maintains that only direct negotiations can establish a Palestinian state. That means direct negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians. The problem is that's not going to happen because neither side actually is open to a Palestinian state at this point. The Palestinians, sure, they want a Palestinian state, but they want all of Israel. As a matter of fact, yesterday, the leadership of the Houthis, such as it is in Yemen, put up a gigantic backlit billboard map of Israel saying, this is the Palestinian state. This is the only Palestinian state that we will accept. So now there's an incredible history here. Statehood has been offered to the Palestinians multiple times and has been rejected every single time. In 1937, under the British Mandate, the Peel Commission offered to partition two states, a Jewish and an Arab state, together. The Jews accepted it sort of reluctantly. The Arabs outright rejected it and then launched the Arab Revolt of 1936 to 1939. So that's the first time they were offered a state, and they rejected it. The second time they were offered a state was in 1947. The United Nations Partition Plan under Resolution 181. The Jews got 55% of the land, the Arabs got 45% of the land, and Jerusalem would stay international under the control of Great Britain. The Jews accepted that deal. The Arabs rejected it and invaded in 1948. And so that was the next war. Then fast forward to 1979 and 1982, the Camp David Accords. Israel agreed to give the Palestinians autonomy in Judea and Samaria and Gaza. Actually give them Judea and Samaria and give them Gaza, okay, that can be your state. The Palestinian Liberation Organization rejected that. Egypt signed it, and that was part of the peace deal with Egypt, but the Palestinians flatly refused. So what's that, the fourth time? Then in 1993 to 2000, under the Oslo Accords, they tried again. Palestinian Authority was created. Israel withdrew from the A zones in the West Bank areas, so Nablus and Jenin and other, Jericho and other places, Bethlehem. Israel withdrew from those completely. And instead of peace, what did Israel get? They got more suicide bombings, and they turned those cities that were turned over to them into bases for terror networks like the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade and so on and so forth. Okay, PIJ and things like that. Then in 2000, under Bill Clinton, the Camp David Summit under Yasser Arafat, with Yasser Arafat. Ehud Barak, Bill Clinton, and Yasser Arafat got together on the Camp David Summit of 2000, offered to give the Palestinians 95% of the West Bank, give them all of Gaza, and let East Jerusalem be their capital, and then swap land for them wherever there were places where Arabs lived already that were outside those areas. And they'd swap some for areas inside those areas where Israelis live. Arafat refused, flatly refused, and then launched the Second Intifada. More than 1,000 Israelis were killed in the Second Intifada. Okay? Then, fast forward 8 more years under Olmert. Was Ehud Olmert? What was his first name? In 2008. His plan, which was done in Annapolis, Maryland, gave 97% of the West Bank, all of Gaza, and split Jerusalem. It would be shared between both the Palestinians and the Israelis. Mahmoud Abbas walked away and just said, no, nothing doing. Then John Kerry tried again in 2014. And the U.S. plan was similar to Olmert's plan in 2008. And Netanyahu engaged with it and said, okay, well, let's talk. We're willing to sit down and talk about this. Mahmoud Abbas just flatly refused, never signed. Fast forward again to 2020. The first Trump administration, President Trump came up with a peace plan, 70% of the West Bank and all of Gaza, and a $50 billion economic package given to the Palestinians. The Palestinians rejected that one before they even reviewed it. They didn't even look at it. They just said, nope, not going to do it. Not going to happen. So the pattern here is that every time there's an offer made, the Palestinians reject it. And it's often followed by violence and not negotiations. So this should tell you everything you need to know about whether or not it's worth recognizing a Palestinian state, because the Palestinians themselves won't allow a Palestinian state to be recognized. The only Palestinian state they will accept is all of Israel, and the Israelis have to die or leave. And that's obviously a non-starter. It's not going to happen. Now, I want to just stop for a minute and encourage you to go over to chuckholton.com, because we are adding a lot of extra content there. There, as I mentioned, are videos that I cannot show you here on YouTube because they're too graphic. I will put those up for supporters only over on chuckholton.com. That, like the video of Hamas executing Palestinians in Gaza yesterday, stuff like that. You also get access to my documentaries. I've got 65 documentaries, and you've got access to many of them over there. We just put one up yesterday. It should still be pinned to the top of the page about the fragile U.S. power grid and just how dangerous it is, how close we have come to actually massive grid down event in the United States. Just yesterday, this is an addition, just kind of an aside, in addition to what I talked about yesterday. Yesterday, the Secret Service, as they were trying to secure the UN General Assembly, uncovered a plot in New York to basically shut down all communications in New York, completely shut down through a massive denial of service attack. What they found was somebody had set up a room full of servers, and these servers had more than 100,000 SIM card, cellular chips in them. And they were all going to start sending text messages at the same time, and it was essentially going to completely shut down all of the cell networks and everything in New York during the UN General Assembly. Now, this is something that took a tremendous amount of prior planning. This is something that likely was the opening gambit for a much bigger terror attack in New York that would have happened yesterday or today. And because the Secret Service uncovered it and took it down, they were unable to do so. But the real question is, who's behind it? It's something of that magnitude, a massive server room with over 100,000, basically, ghost, or what do they call those things? Zombie SIM cards. That sounds like something that would be set up by a nation state like Russia or China or Iran. Now, doesn't have to be. It's not out of the realm of possibility that it could be done by Antifa or somebody like that. But the bottom line is somebody was targeting New York during the UN General Assembly, and it looks like we narrowly missed a massive terror attack in New York. Now, that just came out this morning. We'll find out more about that, and I may do another live about that soon. The bottom line is you need to go to chuckholton.com because that's where we put a lot of this stuff, and you can watch the full documentary I did on the U.S. power grid over there, and if you're a supporter. And that's how we managed to keep doing this. We've got a staff now of about 10 people, and we're putting out more than $10,000 a month in payroll that I've got to meet. And so every little bit helps. And not to mention the fact that we are giving away $6,000 or more a month to needy people around the world. I have a real heart for single mothers, and we're supporting single moms in Ukraine, in Panama, in Colombia, in just all in the United States, even places all around the globe, and in Israel as well, in Armenia as well. I'm just trying to think. I mean, it's just lots of places. I'm going to bring you a real sad story later on this week. I'm going to go film it tomorrow, Thursday. And this is the kind of thing that we do with the money that we get from chuckholton.com, from locals over there, from here on the YouTube channel. So for the super chats and super thanks and tips and stuff that people leave here on YouTube, a lot of that goes to helping these people that are in need in the places that I go. So thank you to all of our supporters, and I really appreciate you very, very much. And I don't want to let you feel like I'm, not grateful. I'm very, very grateful for that. Okay, so let's talk about the just rampant hypocrisy of the European countries that are now recognizing Palestine as a state, telling Israel, you've got to give the Palestinians the authority to govern themselves as an autonomous state. When France, just to choose one of these, still controls French Guiana, Guadeloupe, Martinique, Réunion, Mayotte, New Caledonia, French Polynesia, and Wallis and Fortuna. A lot of these are small islands or small microstates. And however, many of the people of many of those places, Guadeloupe, Martinique, Réunion Island, Mayotte, New Caledonia Island, have been pushing for independence from France for a long time. But France still maintains colonial control over this. Just last year, New Caledonia, there were riots because the people in New Caledonia want to have their own country. And France said no. Paris used violence to go in and violently crush those independence protests and just shelved a referendum that they had promised the people in New Caledonia they would let them have. Guyana hosts Europe's main spaceport, and so France doesn't want to give that up. So the people that live in Guyana are actually considered to be citizens of the European Union. They have French citizenship, but I don't believe they get to vote in France. So they're kind of second-class citizens. Polynesia holds strategic Pacific real estate and resources, so France doesn't want to give it up. Let's move over to the United Kingdom. They just recognized Palestine as a state. They still retain 14 overseas territories. Territories like Gibraltar, the Falkland Islands, Bermuda, the Cayman Islands, the Turks and Caicos Islands, the British Virgin Islands, Montserrat, Anguilla, Pitcairn Islands, etc. The Falklands, Britain insists on sovereignty over that, but Argentina has a claim on the Falklands as well. That's disputed territory. Gibraltar has been fiercely holding forth for strategic control of access to the Mediterranean. Spain has a competing claim on Gibraltar. We could go to Portugal. They just recognized Palestine. They still hold Madeira and the Azores as autonomous regions, but again, second-class citizens. Firmly Portuguese, but not so much, right? Those people want their own states. They want to have control of their own lives, and Portugal won't give that to them. The Azores are a strategic hub for NATO in the mid-Atlantic, and they have the U.S. has a military base there as well. Now, Germany did not go so far as to recognize a Palestinian state, but they're a strong advocate of it. They have advocated for the recognition of a Palestinian state. Germany doesn't have any colonies left. They lost all of those after World War I, but they fiercely oppose other separatist movements in Europe, like Catalonia. In Catalonia, in Spain, the people of Catalonia want to have their own country. They don't want to be part of Spain. They want to have their own country. Corsica wants to be its own country. France won't let them. The Lombardy region of Italy has talked about wanting to secede and become their own country. Italy won't allow them to. And Germany fiercely opposes all of those separatist movements, but they are all for the Palestinians having their own country. So the hypocrisy is nuclear level here. European separatism is forbidden. Palestinian separatism is demanded. And so let's talk about now why this recognition matters and why it doesn't. Then we'll get to your questions. What does this change? Well, like I said, on the ground, it doesn't change anything. It actually reduces the chances that the Palestinians will actually get their own state at some point, because Israel says, if you guys are going to recognize a Palestinian state, we're going to take measures to make sure that Palestinians never can get a state. We're going to exert sovereignty over Judea and Samaria rather than giving it to the Palestinians. The Palestinians have proven that they don't deserve nice things. And Israel is not about to recognize a nation state on their borders that is in writing committed to their destruction. That would be insane. I mean, you wouldn't do that if you had the ability to do it. But this recognition does boost the Palestinian Authority in areas, diplomatic areas, like the International Court of Justice or the International Criminal Court. They don't get votes in the United Nations, but they do get to bloviate in the UN General Assembly. They get to make speeches all the time and condemn Israel and push other nations in the UN to condemn Israel as well. This recognition sort of symbolically isolates Israel. It strengthens the lawfare, that is the claims by international courts against Israel. But what it doesn't change is there's no sovereignty on the ground. Hamas is still in charge in Gaza. The Palestinian Authority is still corrupt and weak because they're very unpopular, even with the Palestinians. Okay, Mahmoud Abbas, if you ask most Palestinians, would you want Mahmoud Abbas to be the president of your country? They say absolutely not. He's corrupt, he's weak, and he's worthless. The Palestinian Authority, however, still pays for murderers who have committed acts of terror against Israel and pays them salaries based on how many Israelis they killed. So obviously, Israel's not going to go for that. Israel still maintains decisive control of the borders of their country. They have already reacted to what happened yesterday in the UN by saying that they are not going to reopen the border crossing with Jordan at the King Hussein Bridge, or they call it the Allenby Bridge on the Israeli side. Israel has closed that indefinitely now. And that's bad. That's sad, because when I want to go to Jordan from Jerusalem, crossing at the Allenby Bridge is the easiest way to do it. It takes about an hour to get there. You can take a taxi down there. You can walk across the border and then take a taxi from there straight to Amman. Now, if I want to go to Jordan, I'm going to have to drive 2 hours north to the Sea of Galilee, cross there, and then drive 2 hours back south to Amman. And so this makes life more difficult for the Palestinians that cross back and forth from Israel into Jordan. And it makes life more difficult for foreigners, other foreigners like me and Oscar Blue Ramirez, whenever we want to come and go through that border. So the Palestinians, for their part, are continuing. If you ask Palestinians, do you want your own country? They say yes, from the river to the sea. That means the end of Israel. They're not looking to coexist with Israel. Okay? So recognition by 157 nations is a virtue signal and very little more. The Palestinians have already rejected statehood every time it was offered to them because their leadership's true objective is the elimination of Israel. And Europe lectures Israel on self-determination while denying that very self-determination and independence to their own territories because they have strategic and economic gain in mind from those places. So the bottom line is, this is not about principle on the part of the French or the people from the UK or whatever. This is about politics. Israel is the scapegoat, and the hypocrisy of the world is going unchallenged. Now, one more kind of humorous thing that came from yesterday's recognition. When Keir Starmer recognized the state of Palestine, the Palestinian Authority immediately put a written request to the UK and said, great, now that you recognize us as a state, we would like reparations, please, for what was done to us during the British rule that ended in 1947. And some experts have said, well, what kind of reparations are they talking about? If it was monetary reparations, you're looking at something like 2 trillion British pounds. 2 trillion, which is about the size of the entire British economy. So thank you very much for recognizing us as a state. Please give us 2 trillion pounds. Just awesome. Just fantastic. I mean, you couldn't make stuff like that up. Nobody would believe it if you did. All right, so we're going to go over to questions now. We've been on for about 45 minutes. So let me pull up the question sheet here. And if you have questions, thank you for the $49.99 there, whoever that was, Leona. I appreciate that very much. It does mean a lot. So let's see here. Where are my questions? There they are. All right. So Julie Wallace says, is there any truth to 800,000 Antifa taking over Paris? I don't know about 800,000, but they have had lots of protests. But I think maybe what you're thinking is Milan, not Paris. What I saw was that there were very large riots yesterday in Italy, not in Paris. It wouldn't make sense for Antifa to be rioting in Paris over the declaration of a Palestinian state, because Antifa is left wing. Left wingers would want a Palestinian state to be recognized. There have been a lot of violent protests in Paris and across France because of the government, and most of it is because of necessary changes that are being made in their welfare state. For example, France is a very socialist country. And so they have a lot of social programs. They have a lot, 4-day work week and lots of vacation time, and you can't be fired, and you get stipends for everything. And there's, generous retirement. You can retire at 58, and you can, it's just all, this stuff that politicians in socialist countries put out there to get themselves voted into office. And then when they run out of money, then things get violent. And that's what we're seeing here, is a lot of these leftists are very, very angry that the French government is saying, look, we have to cut back on some of these social programs because we just are running out of money. Yeah, you think? This is like play stupid games, win stupid prizes, French edition, okay? Norman Salas says, was wondering what province, city in Panama you reside in. My friend Jose Cardenas is there right now because that is where his family was raised. I live up in the mountains in Cocle province, which is about 2 hours outside of Panama City. Norman Salas says, the UN can only recommend, correct? There's no two-state solution that they recognize yet, or am I wrong? No, the UN itself has not recognized a two-state solution, but 157 countries out of the 193 countries that belong to the UN have recognized a Palestinian state. The reason why the UN hasn't done it is because the United States has veto power and has vetoed that every time they brought it up. So I understand how that would be confusing, but there you go. Laura Rudolph says, do we really take what France says seriously? They're bought out by Qatar. Yeah, they do get a lot of money from Qatar. And there was some big fireworks in in the UN General Assembly talking about Qatar yesterday. I should have gotten that video and put it up, because there was one guy that got up and just eviscerated Qatar. It was really good. Norman Salas says, what's happening in the United Nations doesn't have the power to force anything. That's, well, true. Out of this meeting comes the signing of a peace covenant. Has that happened yet? No, it has not, because the United States vetoes it. The UN put forward a resolution a few days ago calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, release of all the hostages, an end to the war, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the United States vetoed that, not because they don't want the release of all the hostages, but because they know that Hamas is not going to play ball with that. They could, the Hamas is not a part of the United Nations. Israel is. So if they passed a resolution to that effect, it would have more effect on Israel than it would have on Hamas. Wouldn't have any effect on Hamas. So the United States vetoed it. Okay. Is your flag one of the Borean republics? No, the flag on my shirt here is from Burma. It's a Burmese tribe. Norman Salas says, hey Chuck, so You were an Army Ranger for 19 years? No, I was not an Army Ranger for 19 years. I was an Army Ranger for 4 years. I would not be alive if I tried to do that job for 19 years. It's pretty hard on your body. But I did participate in Operation Just Cause, which was the invasion of Panama, whereby we came down and took out a dictator and remanded him into custody of the federal justice system in the United States. Nicholas Dupree says, why would someone plot to crash the cell network in New York City? What would this accomplish? Well, it would cause chaos because nobody would be able to make any phone calls or text messages for a period of time. And as I say, that likely was the precursor, the opening salvo of a bigger terrorist plot. So you take out their communications and then you start attacking things, massive multi-cell terror attack kind of thing. And it takes down all the networks. So even law enforcement might have a hard time getting to respond to any other terror attack that took place. So that's why. Laura Rudolph says, why did they change the law so churches can accept money from political parties, encourage fraud? Let's save that for another day. That has nothing to do with anything that we're talking about. Laura Jackson says, did the USA vote in favor of a Palestinian state? No, we did not. Greg Thompson said, has a Palestinian state officially been given the green light to be created? No, it has not. Ghoster says, where did they say where this state would be? Yeah, they said it would be the 1967 boundaries of what they call the West Bank and Gaza. So go back to the 1967 boundaries of Israel and the West Bank, and the West Bank areas, East Jerusalem and Gaza would be the Palestinian state. Not going to happen. Gracie Jones says, where's the flotilla? Apparently it's still en route. It must be taking them some time, probably because they can't agree on anything. Those people are so ridiculous. I mean, what a circus that is. We don't even need to talk about that. I don't want to give them the airtime. Lord Peanut says, why is no one protesting to free Cyprus? Good question. Turkey took over a third of the island of Cyprus. Now they call that North Cyprus or Turkic Cyprus. And nobody's saying that they need to be freed. But there you go. Now, Israel just gave the rest of Cyprus, real Cyprus, a new radar technology, some radar apparatus that will dramatically increase their ability to see things coming in. That will help Israel and will help Cyprus as well. And so there you go. Laura Jackson says, are Bethlehem, the Temple Mount, and Judea and Samaria part of East Jerusalem? No, Judea and Samaria are not part of East Jerusalem. East Jerusalem is separate. It's still there. It consists of basically the Arab quarter of the old city, and then everything that's kind of north and east of that. And you can go to East Jerusalem. I go in there and go shopping sometimes. The pharmacy that I like is in East Jerusalem. You can tell when you pass from regular Jerusalem into East Jerusalem because things get a lot dirtier, a lot sketchier, and everything's in Arabic. It's not part of Judea and Samaria. Those are separate, and Hebron. But the Temple Mount, yes. Bethlehem, no. Bethlehem is an A zone that's in Judea. Okay. And so, no. I hope that's clear as mud for you. Time for me to fly says, is it official, the two-state solution? No, it's not. Time for me to fly says, how many votes do they need? Isn't it overwhelmingly yes? No, because the United States has veto power. And if every single country but the United States voted for something, the U.S. could still veto it because it's one of the 7 permanent council members. So Ben Green says, you mentioned Gaza's population has grown since October 7th. Can you source that so I can share with friends and have something that confirms that? Yeah, I have actually. I've posted things over at chuckholton.com. Specifically, there are reports that show how the genocide claims are absolutely bogus. So just go to chuckholton.com, scroll back through the stuff that we've posted there, and you should be able to find that. If some of it is supporters only and some of it is not, so I'm not sure. You might need to be a supporter to get it, but there is plenty of concrete evidence out there that shows that. Time for me to fly says the land will be divided. No, it's not going to happen. Nothing's going to happen on the ground. Is that true that the UK has already made the map of new Palestinian state? It's all over the internet. Well, they can make all the maps they want. And any more than Israel saying that they're going to recognize the Palestinian state in London, it's just not going to happen. I wanted to play Marine Le Pen because, as I said, the French government is hanging by a thread. And if Marine Le Pen's government takes over, they will likely reverse this decision to recognize the Palestinian state. And you can hear that directly from the mouth of Marine Le Pen. Take a listen.
It is considered that the recognition of Palestine today is an extremely serious mistake, especially with regard to nations fighting against Islamist terrorism. Because the reality, as I wrote, is that it is actually Hamastan, which Emmanuel Macron does not recognize as Palestine. From the moment he sets absolutely no conditions, he gives the impression to all the Islamist terrorists in the world that when one commits a crime as heinous as the barbarity that occurred on October 7th, one gains benefits from it.
Okay, so you heard it there. I mean, she's saying, look, they didn't recognize Palestine. They recognized Hamastan. And she's got a point. She's got a point because even Hamas is, while they're applauding this move, and it certainly makes Hamas feel emboldened, they feel like they're winning. I mean, get that. This makes Hamas feel like they're winning. Are they going to give up if they think they're winning? No, they're not. So it's going to draw out the misery of the Palestinian people. It's going to draw out the misery of the hostages in Gaza. And it's going to result more likely in more Israeli soldiers dying trying to accomplish their goals in Gaza. And that is the only thing that really is going to happen because of this. Adrienne says, is Russia behind the airport attacks? We don't know for sure. I talked about that yesterday. If you want to hear my thoughts on that, go watch yesterday's live because I talked about it yesterday. Christopher in New York says, do you think that our allies are recognizing a Palestinian state to quell the Muslim unrest in their nations? That's one big reason, Chris. France is overrun with Muslims, and so is the UK. And they are pandering to that portion of their electorate who is Muslim. And it's because they're divided cultures, just like the United States is. You don't have to get half the people in the country to vote for you. You just have to get a small segment to vote for you all the time. Like in this case, for France and England, the Muslim, it's a minority still, but it's a sizable minority, sizable enough that it can sway the outcome of elections. And so that's why. Number of crossings, Israel and Jordan now open. I think there's now only two. I think there's only two crossings open now, maybe three. Good question, Diane. There's the one in Eilat. There's the one at the Sea of Galilee. And I think that's all. There might be one more, but I think that's all. MM says, how come Macron, Starmer, and company do not ask Trump for permission to act? Because they don't care what Trump thinks? I don't know. Question, can we expect, Ron says, can we expect God's judgment on the nations that voted to divide Israel? It's a good question. I would not presume to speak for God, but you and I both know that the Bible is very clear that those who bless Israel will be blessed and those who curse Israel will be cursed. So there you go. Lori W. says, are you and Oscar returning to Israel again soon? I don't have any plans to go back to Israel the rest of this year. The rest of my year is pretty full, but maybe next year. Depends on what happens. Nick asks, Bean asks, I don't personally think Israel is committing genocide, but what do you think? Of course not. No, they're not. If they wanted to commit genocide, they could have done it in an afternoon, and there would be nobody left in Gaza. Israel has the capability to genocide Gaza, but they are not. And there are more people in Gaza today. You don't take medical aid into the people that you're trying to genocide. You don't allow food into the people you're trying to genocide. It's ridiculous to say that Israel is genociding the people in Gaza. It's just not. Nick says, what is Israel's response going to be since UN has given it statehood? Well, the UN didn't give them statehood. Be very clear about this. 157 nations that belong to the United Nations voted to recognize Palestine as a country. The United Nations did not vote to recognize Palestine as a country. Okay, some of the nations did, others did not. All right. Mountain Dan said, thank you for that $10. It's going to be biblical in Israel. It always is biblical in Israel. It's Israel. Lisa Marie says, speaking of law, why on earth would Donald Trump give Kash Patel, director of FBI, bad move, infiltrate government, look at the playbooks? That's completely off topic, so I'm going to pass over that question. Supermoto Kev, can you describe what a two-state solution would really look like? An actual two-state solution that worked would be Jordan becoming the Palestinian state and agreeing to allow Israel to exist. That would be the true Palestinian state. Or all the Palestinians going to some remote island off the coast of somewhere, maybe a fake island off the coast of Dubai or something, and call that their country. But as it is right now, the Palestinians are not going to get a country inside Israel. It's just not going to happen. Chris says, do you think our allies are willing to support? Oh, no, we already got that. Okay, that was up there twice. Jay says, what are your thoughts on the UN being the start of a one world government? I think it certainly is pointing that direction for sure. Adam Forbes says, what is the future of Gaza for the people that continue to live there for years to come? That depends on how this goes. If Israel is able to defeat Hamas and institute a better form of government there, I think their lives will get much better. If they accept some sort of half measure that leaves Hamas in charge, then things are not going to get better in the Palestinian areas of Gaza. It's just not going to happen. Thank you, Omega Sparrow. Appreciate that. And Chris says Jordan is like 70% Palestinian, 60% Palestinian in Jordan. Yes. So, I mean, the Jordanian first lady, or the wife of the king, is Palestinian. So that's one reason why the Jordanians do not want more Palestinians in their country, because they're already 60% of the country. And the Bedouin faction that actually runs the country, they don't want more. They don't want more Palestinians. They do cause a lot of problems being there. Lauren says, is Israel of today the Israel in the Bible? Well, I mean, yes and no. The Israel of today is the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. I think that's very clear. It is not the same nation that existed 3,000 years ago. Exactly. I mean, it is, a lot of the people in Israel are descendants of that nation, for sure. But the bottom line and the most important thing to remember, because I know a lot of people will say, when the Bible says to support Israel, they're not talking about the current state of Israel. And usually they say that because there are a lot of left-wingers in government in Israel, and conservatives in the United States are like, I'm not going to support a left-wing government who pushes the jab and all that kind of stuff. I get that. I understand that. But I think the better question to ask is the government of Israel that exists right now the nation of Israel? Or are those two things separate? You could ask the same thing about the United States. Is the United States government the country of America? Or is the nation separate from its government? Because our government changes from time to time and absolutely flip-flops 180 degrees. So that would make if the government is the nation, then that would make the United States a really kind of bipolar country, right? But that's not the case. The government is not the nation. The nation is the people, right? It's like saying that the church is the body of believers, not the building that they worship in, right? So the borders of ancient Israel were much larger than the borders of current day Israel. But suffice it to say that the current modern day nation of Israel is the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. That is very, very clear. And I think that's the best answer I can give you there. Okay. Scott H. says, do you think the UN will send troops to Gaza? It could be a world war if they dare. No, the UN's not going to send troops to Gaza. That won't happen because the United States would have to agree to that, and the US is not going to agree to that. Ain't going to happen. Nope. All right. That's all I've got for today, folks. Thank you very much for watching. 3,000 people online. Please hit that like button on your way out. It makes a difference. It helps to grow this channel. Also, don't forget to subscribe and go over to chuckholton.com and become a supporter over there. So if you just hit that subscribe button, you can get alerted when we go live, and we'll let you know beforehand. Also, don't forget to check out the description of this video, and there are links there to the trips that we have going to Armenia and to my other YouTube channel, which I just started, which is just beautiful walks and hikes all around the world in beautiful places. So I would appreciate it if you'd go take a look at that channel as well. If you want to subscribe over there, help me get the word out about that new channel. So, all right. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate all of you, and we will see you again next time. Bye-bye.